The leader of the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces has announced the official dissolution of the group, which will now join with the Syrian military. The Democratic Forces, backed by Washington, are at the forefront of the battle against the Islamic State group. Syria's president, Ahmad al-Sharaa, has pledged to uphold Kurdish rights following the merger. Here's more from the commander of the Syrian Democratic Forces.
Since the establishment of the Syrian Democratic Forces, its fighters have carried a heavy responsibility during one of the most difficult periods in Syria's history. They liberated many Syrian cities and towns, first from Ba'ath rule and then from the terror of ISIS. Today's circumstances have changed, and the country has entered a new phase, one of peace and participation in building a new Syria.
Andrew Hilliar joins me on the set to talk a bit more about all of this. And this announcement comes after months of negotiations between the Syrian government and the SDF. What were the main sticking points?
Yeah, well, there have been a series of agreements over the last couple of years between the Syrian government and Syrian Kurdish forces. Back in January, an agreement called for the full integration of Kurdish civil and military institutions into the state. And you remember that essentially put an end to fighting in northeastern Syria, which had seen the Kurds lose very large swathes of territory. And at the same time, Syria's president, Ahmad al-Sharaa, signed a decree enshrining the Kurds' national rights, recognizing Kurdish as a national language. So these were all unprecedented steps, Jeannie. And since then, we've seen the kind of steady implementation of this agreement. We saw a Kurd appointed the governor of Kamishli. We saw a senior Kurdish military official appointed regional defense minister. Government forces have since entered the cities of Kamishli and Hasakeh. Government forces also taking over key oil fields. However, it hasn't been smooth. There have been several issues dragging out negotiations. There have been disagreements surrounding the integration of the Syrian Democratic Forces and Kurdish security forces into the Syrian state. And one issue in particular that I want to show you as well, the unresolved questions about, on the one hand, the group's heavy weapons and also the YPJ, that's the all-female Kurdish militia. Now, the YPJ argued that they should be integrated into the Ministry of Defense, into Syria's Ministry of Defense as professional soldiers. They argued they took part in the fighting which defeated the Islamic State group. However, Damascus had only offered them to be integrated into the Ministry of the Interior as police officers. So these are unresolved issues that have been delaying this announcement.
That's fascinating. How significant is all of this for Syria?
It is a significant moment. I mean, the Kurds essentially, Syrian Kurdish forces essentially played a huge part in defeating the Islamic State group on the battlefield, of course, with Western air support, you'll remember. The US then threw its backing behind Ahmad al-Sharaa when he swept to victory almost 2 years ago. Now, Mazloum Abdi, the Syrian Kurdish leader we just heard from there, last Thursday announced the completion of civil and military integration. And then on Tuesday, he announced the dissolution of the SDF as part of that integration plan, just to clarify the timing of these announcements. So what optimistic analysts, you could call them, say is that this lays the groundwork for a united Syria. So that's good news for the government in Damascus. Now, I'm going to show you a map just to remind you what the situation looked like on December 8th, 2024, when the Assad regime fell. You can see here, and there was large areas of northeastern Syria under the control of Kurdish forces, as you can see on your screen there. Of course, the situation has changed radically, dramatically since then, Jeannie. And essentially what happened is that Ahmad al-Sharaa, the country's president, took the bull by its horns with this broader push to consolidate control. So what we could see is perhaps ripple effects on other small pockets of rebels in the country. Now, while the new administration, Jeannie, in Damascus has granted the Kurds more rights than their predecessors, this does appear to be the end of what was essentially an autonomous military force that had played a huge part in defeating the Islamic State group. And even bigger than that, this appears to be the end of the Kurdish dream of autonomy, at least in Syria.
Andy, thank you for that. France 24's Andrew Hilliar.